boys and girls. How are you? Happy Thanksgiving. I'm so excited to see you this coming week. Miss you guys and want to definitely start chapter 9. That's where we're at. And the chapter is called Bad Seed. Bad Seed. So we're going to read that. And I really do hope that you guys had a great Thanksgiving safely with your families. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen so we can find out what happens because we know that in chapter 8, he was suspended. So I'm going to pull up the screen. Here we go. All right. So bad seed. So what's going to happen to Joey now that he has been suspended? All right. I'm trying to get as close as possible so you guys can see it. All right, very good. The next day, I broke one of Mom's big rules. I left the house while she was at work and limped about 10 blocks over to Maria's house. All the way over, I practiced what I wanted to say to her about how sorry I was, and I went over it again just before I knocked on her door. Boy, if you're thinking what I'm thinking, there's definitely a character trait that would describe Joey right now. And you guys can think about it, and then we can certainly discuss it. It opened really fast, and a big man in a mechanic's greasy jumpsuit, who I figured must be her dad, said, "Who are you?" "I'm Joey Pigza," I replied, and I was very nervous because all the way over in my mind, she was going to answer the door. I was ready for that. But it didn't turn out that way. Now I felt that I didn't know what to do. So I just said I meant to tell her. I just said what I meant to tell her. "I'm here to say, I'm sorry," I said, and I smiled like I had just stepped on the toe of a 300-pound gorilla. All right, guys, I'm going to turn the page. But before I do, start thinking about an inferencing based on what you know happened with Maria. What do you think might happen next? Just that's what a good reader would do, right? He pulled the door behind him so to close off the house like I was going to trick him and run through his legs and attack Maria's nose again. "Get out of here," he said. I held my two scissors cut paper fingers up in front of my face. "I didn't come here with my scissors," I said. Then he stepped toward me. "They shouldn't let messed up kids go to school with regular kids," he said. I backed away. "I'm only a little messed up," I said quietly. He stepped toward me again, quickly, as if he were going to pick me up like a chunk of log and heave me off the property. "Come here," he said, and reached for me. Even with my bad ankle, I was pretty quick, and I turned and ran down the sidewalk. I glanced over my shoulder, and he wasn't running at me, but he was walking real quick, like he just wanted to stick out his belly and bump me along. Behind him, in the big front window, Maria was watching with a huge bandage around her face and lots of silver get well balloons floating above her head and a fluffy white puppy squirming in her arms. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to run over and apologize to her hurt face, and I wanted to run from him, but I just get jammed up, and as he came at me, I stood there, frozen, and closed my eyes. But he didn't hit me. "Get out of here," he said. "It was an accident," I replied. "I'm not a bad kid." "I don't care if you're the baby Jesus," he said. "You hurt my girl again, and it'll be lights out for you and your whole family." "My mom had nothing to do with this," I said. He just looked at me with a nasty face, threw his head back, and laughed. "Your mom had everything to do with this." "That's a lie," I said. "She wasn't even there." By then, I was so mad at him for talking bad about my mom, I was no longer afraid. "My mom is not the problem," I shot back at him. "I am." And I surprised him with that because he didn't know what to do next. But I did. I put my hands on my hips, turned, and walked off with my chin held high. And it wasn't until I went all the way back home and sat on the porch and remembered that I'd no longer be going back to my regular school that I got scared. I'd be somewhere else with a lot of strange kids and teachers. And I have to tell you that all of this worried me so much. I went back to the house and tried to find the meds because I wanted to take a bunch of them and return myself to normal. But it was also one of mom's rules to bring them to, let me go ahead and go to page 86. Work with her, and she didn't break her own rules. So I just crawled up into the lazy boy chair and stared at the photograph of me being very still and gave myself a timeout. When mom called to check up on me, I told her everything was okay now. That night, after mom cooked a dinner of macaroni and cheese, we took a walk. I've been thinking about you all day, she said, and kept her arm rested across my shoulder so that her warm hand covered my ear, which was nice because the wind was blowing. I've been thinking about you too, I said, looking up at her, then down at the sidewalk, then up at her again, then down again, because once I had stepped on dog poop and slipped and never forgot it. Well, you've been on my mind because I have to work early tomorrow and can't see you onto the bus in the morning. Oh, I said in a small voice, and I felt my whole body get sad. I was hoping you could. Me too, she said softly, but I just couldn't shift my early appointments around at work. Those ladies get pretty fussy about having their hair done on time. Still, I have two presents for you. I looked up at her. Two? I said, for me? I love presents. The first one, she said, doesn't look like a present. It isn't gift wrapped. It doesn't have a ribbon around it, but I think it is a huge present. Well, we stopped walking and stood still, and she stared down at me and cupped my chin in her hand. My first present, she said very seriously, is good advice. I want you to remember something that has always helped me. Whenever you think of something bad, you have to quick think of something good. And you can never think of three things bad in a row, or else you will just feel awful. Okay, I said, wishing there was more to the present than advice. Something more I could hold in my hands. I mean it, she said, because she knew I wasn't listening as seriously as she was talking. Does that mean if I have a good thought, then I have to think of something bad? I asked, turning it all around. No, she replied. You can think of all the good thoughts in a row you want. Okay, now what's my second present? I asked because the thrill of the first one had worn off quickly. It is a very small present, she said. Smaller than the last one? I shouted and began to stagger as if I was wounded in action. Be patient. It starts small and gets bigger. We passed the ice cream parlor where I knew I was Here we go. Where I knew I was never allowed to go. And the Polish American Club, where my grandmother said my dad spent some of his time bouncing around before he went to Pittsburgh. And when we turned and walked into the used and then we turned and walked into the used bookstore. A book? I asked, thinking that my presents were getting really small. A book is only part of it, she said, and the way she was smiling told me it was really good. We walked to the back of the store, and there was a short shelf of books on pets and pet care. She reached onto the shelf and pulled out a book on dogs. Joey, if you do really well in special ed, she said, you can get a dog. And I was beaming inside. I had always wanted a dog, a little dog that looked just like me, a Joey dog, a nice, springy dog, a good dog. I had told Grandma I wanted one, but she said having a dog in the house would be just like having two of me. But now I flipped through the book with a huge smile on my face. There were about 1,000,000 dogs to choose from, but I knew which one was for me, a Chihuahua. Thanks, I said. I'm not thinking bad thoughts. She knelt down and kissed me on the forehead. You better not be, she replied. Your luck is changing. From now on, you will be known as Joey Pigza, the lucky boy with his own dog. And that, boys and girls, is the end of chapter 9. It was a short chapter, so I might do chapter 10 before the week is done because this is a short chapter. However, I do want to make sure that you, of course, answer the questions so we can at least communicate that way and discuss the book in those ways. All right, can't wait to see you guys. It is this coming week.